So this is kind of weird, but I was thinking we could like introduce ourselves since this is going to be like on this YouTube channel. So
Mhm.
even though we all know each other, like whatever you want to say. So I can start that that my name's obviously Lindsay Whittle, but I always say that I also go by Sparklezilla and Future Lindsay. So I don't know if either of you want to introduce yourself in some way.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. So I'm BowTy Enterprises Venture Capital. We're sort of like a metaphysical corporation that extends to the bio emotional techno boundaries of our entity. And yeah, we sort of are an organization of 17 different core paradigms that then branch out and invest in other versions of ourselves. So that's us basically.
That was an incredible bio.
Mhm.
Krista,
Indeed, it
all of
was.
that.
I'm Krista. I'm in grad school at University of Michigan, and I'm an artist that deals with, I guess, kind of work with identity through like health collection and memory. Really boring compared to all of those.
No,
I love.
absolutely not. I am obsessed with both of your practices. So so I'm going to try to run through. So I mean, I talk about this project with Clint all the time, and I think he follows most of it, but I haven't really talked about it too much. So I'm going to run through these slides, but it could be kind of raw because most of it's been in my mind. Um,
Cool.
so a little bit of a
Perfect.
backstory here. This is me from high school. And
Oh,
so those were my
Yay.
pets, but it's so funny when I handed that picture out to people, people would always go, "Are those your pets?" And I'm like, "What?" Like, no, they were the studio pets. Like, why would I get my picture taken with random pets? But in any event, so I threw that picture in there because like I never identified as a reader and I always wanted to. I was very jealous of people that were readers and I like wanted to be a reader. I think it was like I have like really intense ADHD and I think I just had a hard time like staying with the reading, like staying focused. And I think I also just got like overwhelmed and had a hard time processing the content. So for like most of my childhood, my mom actually had to read most of my school books. And then when I was in high school, my friend Debbie and I we had this like intense scheme where we would read all the Cliff Notes and watch all the movies. I think we honestly put like 3 times the amount of work. Like if we had just read the book, it actually would have been so much easier than the amount of work we put in to like hack the system to not read the book. So somehow I like survived through school with barely ever reading anything ever. And then I'd say like as I got into adulthood, I definitely would get into audiobooks here and there. And then I would read, but like maybe like 3 or 4 books a year. And I'm one of those people that like starts a lot of books but doesn't finish. So that's kind of like a backstory of like my perception of reading. And then I know Chris has heard me talk about this book a million times. And that's fine because when I read it, I think I was teaching Krista right around the time I read it, but it really like shifted how I thought about learning and then how I thought about the brain and the brain's capability. Like, I think I believed until this book that the brain was fixed. And after this book, I believed that like the brain can evolve and change. Like if you did exercise in a gym and your muscles would evolve and change, the brain could evolve and change. So, and then he had a little chapter on speed reading. And then I took he has an online course that I took on speed reading, and that tripled my words per minute. But it also kind of made
Mm.
reading like a game for me. So
Uh-huh.
like I think that's what solved my ADHD problem because trying to read faster helped me like focus because it became a game of like, can I read this page faster than the page before? And so I was like staying with the content because speed reading kind of made it fun and weird.
Mhm.
And then I also so I do this coaching program, The Clutch, and that also is about like changing your thoughts and how you perceive your own identity. So I feel like that's also a factor. I think those two things were like maybe the biggest influences that I did this thing. And then I have this collage of when I was in New York last summer, not this previous summer, but the summer before. Um, I started kind of hardcore reading after the speed reading class in New York. So around between July and December of last year, I read 46 books, which and I would say it was like 60% read books and maybe 40% audiobooks. Because I think taking in information, because I think it's hard to perceive information through your ears and through your eyes. So I think learning to perceive those faster is good either direction. But so I was like, if I can do 46 books in half a year, could I do 100 books in a whole year? And again, like childhood me would have like laughed in my face with this goal because like never would have believed it. So when I tried to divide 100 books by 12, it was like a weird number. So I went with 108 because then that made like a nice 9 books per month. So when I started in January, I only read 6 books, which freaked me out. I was like, oh man, I'm not going to hit my goal. And then I shocked myself in February and I read 10 books. And then something, and this, you know, it was just really interesting when you show up for something that you've committed to, that like something happened between March and April that just something like unlocked or clicked or something. So the highest amount of books I read was in May. I read 18 books, and that was one every 1.7 days. So I'm kind of intrigued that like if I was able to keep up that momentum, I could in theory read 216 books in a year, which again like would like blow my mind. So I finished my 108th book on August 30th. It was Colin Jost, A Very Punchable Face. I had actually started that book months before, and it was through the library, and it kept like I would not finish it in time, and then I'd have to get back on the waiting list. So it became this. I love that this was the book that finished the 108 because I had to recheck it out like 5 times because the system, that's the way the system was. So some of the data, like you can see here, that high point that was May. And I was reading this book series called Zodiac Academy that had 8 books. And the last book was 1,300 pages. So that's why this is like such a high spike. I was like really into those books. So I'm at 112 books right now. Here's some of the like different moods that I tend to read, some of the authors that I've read from, some of the different genres. Yeah, I just thought I thought some of this data was kind of interesting. So here's and this was Bo and I had checked in on this project earlier in the year. So I made these worksheets that are sort of book reports. Sometimes depending on what's going on in my life, sometimes I have time to fill them out immediately. And sometimes I play frantic catch up later, which is kind of weird. It's like a test of my memory because obviously it's easier right in the moment to like fill those out. But so like for the nonfiction books, it's, you know, what are the main ideas? What's the evidence that supports that? What are 2 questions for the author? Most interesting takeaways, 3 facts I learned, favorite quotes, new words I learned. How did I connect this book to my life? And then for the fiction books, sorry, it's smaller to read, but so I give all books a teamwork rating because that's the most important thing to me. And then I also check off if they used whittle in a sentence. That's a secondary project I'm doing. I actually write down anybody that uses whittle in a sentence, but also in the books. And so like if they use whittle in a sentence, they are like instantly higher up the ladder in my mind. But so I write down the main characters. What does the author want the reader to get from this? What are some key takeaways? What parts did I like, not like? What question would I ask the author? What tropes did this book use? Favorite character, least favorite character? What was the main problem? What was the solution to the problem? What was a critical turning point? Can I make any extended connections to my life? Summary of the book in 1 sentence. And that tends to be the most fun on this report. So some of the books are just wild. So the sentence is just like crazy. Setting, beginning, middle, and end. How did this book make me feel? Bo, you were the one that told me to put that question on there. And then why did I pick this book? I think you also told me to put that question on there. So yeah, when I'm able to, I fill it out in the moment. Sometimes I fill them out later. Krista knows how much I'm obsessed with worksheets. But the goal of this was basically to try to expand my critical thinking and not just like consuming the content, but like thinking about it. So here's some interesting media facts. I used Kindle Unlimited. I ended up subscribing about halfway through because it's actually quite costly to be a reader.
Yeah.
And I'm in some reader groups that these people spend like $2,000 like every couple months, like buying all their books. And some of them are like really intense about having like the precious copies and stuff. So I use a lot of Libby and Hoopla, which are library apps. I did a free subscription for Scribed, and that was like 45 days. I did a free subscription of Kindle Unlimited, and then I ultimately ended up subscribing because I use it all the time. And then I use Audible sometimes. And so it's actually least common that I've used the physical books, just because I like to read everywhere all the time, and it's harder to like carry those around with me. But so I did the math. I ended up doing 29% of the books of my 108 were audiobooks, but the ones in yellow, I've discovered my favorite way to read a book is to have a copy of it as an ebook and an audiobook. And then, because sometimes I get so immersed that I'll like put off doing things I need to do so that I can keep reading. Whereas if I can switch into the audio copy while I'm running errands or doing other things, so my favorite is to do a little bit of both. So sometimes I do that because Kindle Unlimited, they let you buy the audio copy for cheaper. Sometimes I do it that way. Sometimes the library will just let me check out each one, and I just rotate between them. So hybrid means it was like half read and half audio. But what's weird is before I started this project, I almost like I preferred audiobooks, and I almost always did audiobooks, but now I actually prefer the written books because I can read so much faster than I can listen. And I get annoyed when like I just want to know what happens, and I get annoyed when I can't like get to it fast enough. So it's interesting that I've made this like flip of like I like them both, and I obviously like to listen to audiobooks while I'm working and driving and things like that, but I'm shocked that now I prefer to like read with my eyeballs. So here's my favorite book so far of the 108. You can tell they tend to be like sci-fi fiction, adventure type stories, except for Mr. Rogers. But no one's surprised there. So yeah, I'd say if I had to pick one, it's probably Zodiac Academy. Because there was this character named Geraldine that only spoke in alliteration, and she was maybe the most absurd character I've ever seen written. And I almost feel like she's my friend, and I miss her all the time. So yeah. So some books I like. I like when there's like romantic people. I like them to be a team. I get really annoyed when there's like a strong power imbalance and there's like manipulation there. That really frustrates me. I like a really good like meant to be soulmate kind of story. I love when the main characters are insanely curious and ask a lot of questions. I'm sure Bo is shocked by that. I like sci-fi adventure quest type stories. I really like really fun and cool female warrior characters that like tap into this like vast power and like save everything. I like when they have fashion art color plots, of course, strong teamwork examples. I like being surprised, and I especially like when it's so weird that I'm just like, what the heck? Like, I love those moments, and I love the exceptionally weird, quirky characters. Almost instantly, those become my favorite books. I like when authors work with unexpected mythical characters. I'm pretty sick of like fairies and werewolves and vampires and dukes. Like, there's so many mythical creatures that I don't understand why we're so focused on like 4. Like there's literally these 4. Oh, and dragons. And so it's like fine and they're fun, but I prefer it when authors are like, you know what, I'm gonna like use this obscure mythical creature that nobody uses. Or just make up your own. Like, why do you even have to use these previously made mythical creatures? I love plots around altruism. I like characters with integrity who treat people with dignity. The reverse of that is I get really annoyed when characters don't treat people with dignity. I love stories, and I like learning from them and like applying them to my marriage. And then of course I like art books. The things I've learned I do not like are torture and cruelty, which are very common in these fantasy quest type books. It's really bizarre. I do not care much for vampires because I have a vein phobia, and it's been really tough because a lot of these fiction books have vampires. But then I accidentally did read a chick flick book a rom-com book where the person, like the main character was is it a phlebotomist, the person who draws blood?
Yeah.
And I was like, how did by the time I caught it, I was already like, I already cared about these characters. It was like the most weird triggering experience there. It was all these details about drawing blood, and Clint's like, why are you reading this? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not a fan of possession demon things unless it's in a funny way. I did read one book where Lucifer was a character and he was obsessed with the show Supernatural, and he would like binge it all the time. So like that didn't bother me, but when it's like possession and controlling stuff in creepy evil ways, not a fan. I don't mind smut in books, but I don't like just smut and no plot. When people recommend that, I just done. And I don't like the smut without the love stories. Apparently, I cannot stand reverse harems, and I did not know this until I started this project. But it's basically like sister wives, but with women. It's sister husbands, is what it is. But yeah, I don't know. I just like I read quite a few books that had amazing poly relationships where everybody's like on the same page and working through it together, whereas the reverse harems, there's, again, you can tell I really don't like imbalance of power structure. So it's like this one person is like in control of everybody, and I am just not a fan. But in all the book groups I'm in, everybody loves them and recommends them all the time, and it's I DNF'd 4 books, almost all of them. So Ember and Ashes and Daughter of Two Worlds, I DNF'd them because they just had too much torture. I just couldn't take it. And then the Ruthless Boys, it was a reverse harem and I couldn't take it. And The Perfect Stranger was just a hot mess and I couldn't do it. And then there were 2 books that I read that I hated so much that I refused to put them in my count. So I'm actually at like 114, but I didn't want to count these 2. So here's the thing that I found the most confusing about this project, and that's the hierarchy of books that people like place. Like, so when I tell people about this project, they get really excited until I tell them that I've mostly read like fiction books that have like adventure and love stories, and then they sort of immediately discredit it or think it's like not cool or something. And especially
the algorithm's off.
It's really weird. But I feel like these same people probably love watching rom-coms and stuff. So it's confusing to me that but especially because people would ask me like what's my favorite book so far, and I would say like Zodiac Academy, but I would say, just so you know, there's like quite a bit of adult scenes in there because I just don't want to catch people off guard. But then people immediately get freaked out and I'm like, well, but do you watch Game of Thrones? Because it's like the same kind of thing. So that was something that I came up against a lot, that people were like, I don't want to say judgy, but very critical of like these books when I'm just interested in all these different kinds of stories. So I thought that was kind of unexpected. So I wanted to put down some critical insights that I had from fiction books, just to kind of counter that idea of like that somehow fiction books are discredited. So I read a book where there was this like demigod kind of figure that was all powerful later in the series, and at the beginning she was like raised by like a pretty destructive, abusive environment, but then later she got kind of found her chosen family and they were just so supportive and complimenting her all the time, and she grew into this like amazing demigod that like saved the day. But what was interesting to me is I think if she had stayed in that abusive situation, I think she could have become like a mega supervillain because she was so powerful and she was in such a toxic environment. And so it really made me think about like again, like I've thought a lot about my marriage through all of this, like you see these marriages where you just get in these routines and ruts where you're really kind of tearing each other down all the time and criticizing each other all the time. And so I read that book around like January, and I was just thinking about how like how this Poppy character became this amazing person because she was so supported and complimented all the time. So I actually put it on my to-do list to try to compliment Clint at least twice a day. And I actually feel like there's just been so much more joy in our lives because we focus now on lifting each other up. Not that we tore each other down, but I just think when you live with somebody all the time, you like nitpick at each other. But I feel like we've made it a priority to like lift each other up. So that was kind of a cool revelation. There was this book where there was this really horrible supervillain that did some really awful stuff to the main characters. And when they finally caught him, they were like going to go to his prison cell and give him his sentence or whatever. And the mom like grabbed them both and was like, do whatever you need to do to like get past this and then forgive this situation so this evil person doesn't ruin any more of your future. Like he's already ruined so much of your past. And that really has impacted me a lot, that like just letting stuff go so that it doesn't cause future damage. I thought that was super helpful. And then there was in Zodiac Academy, the main character, like everything's against her, and even the stars and fate are kind of against her. So she basically tells the stars to F off and defies the laws of nature, brings somebody back from the dead. Like, I just really liked this like unflinching resilience of like nothing will stop her no matter what. And of course, everything about Geraldine was incredible, the character with alliteration. And then the last one, there was this book where they were really talking about this main character's mom was just this like really powerful, beautiful energy that everybody always wanted to be around because she just like made their day better. And that's something I've been thinking a lot about as a teacher, like being like something that was a positive thing for my students to be around. And then of course, vocab building and critical thinking and processing, I think has been like a good part of fiction books. Sorry if this is going longer than I thought. Here's all the books that used whittle in a sentence. The two at the top, Assistant to a Villain and Spare, which was Prince Harry's book. They used, so Assistant to a Villain used whittle 2 times. Harry used it like 3 or 4 times, and that was an audiobook. And I was like, that's pretty cool that the Prince of England is using whittle in a sentence. So, but my dad was convinced because he was English that he didn't use it correctly. And actually, oh shoot, I was going to put a picture in and I think I forgot. My dad actually gave me, yeah, here, let me see if I can just drop it in. Because oh shoot, it's not the right file type. Hold on. Because I was collecting how many times whittle was used in a sentence, my dad gave me this pretty hilarious book that is the true story of this famous whittle. So I guess I'm gonna read this at some point, but here I will drop a screenshot in so you can see it. He kind of looks like a Nazi. I'm not quite sure why. So most of the time when whittle was used in a sentence, it was literally either to whittle wood or whittle something down. But the Ruthless Fae King, there was actually a Dr. Whittle, which I thought was actually that book in general. They had gnomes that loved butterscotch pudding, which I love butterscotch pudding. They had a Zaylee, a Princess Zaylee, that's my sister's name. And then they had a Dr. Whittle. And Clint was like, when did you secretly write this book? And then my 108th book with Colin Jost, he said the phrase, he lost his whittle mind, but it was spelled like whittle. And I'd never heard it that way before. But so I thought that was perfect that my 108th book did have whittle in a sentence. Here's my favorite words that I've discovered through this project. They're, of course, like the most absurd words in all these books, but flummoxed, cattywampus, skullduggery, gobbledygook, flabbergasted. These are like real dictionary words too. Haberdasheries, tomfoolery, gadzooks, gimcrap, harunk, wool gathering, and fortuitous. And these 3 words come up. I never thought about these 3 words. They come up in the books I read constantly. Usurper, sconce, and parapet. I never thought about those words ever. And now I think about them all the time. So, but I'm gathering all of the vocab. I take a screenshot every time I look up a word of the word in the definition. I don't have all of that gathered yet, but it is a pretty large list. Here's the books I'm currently reading, but some of them I've been reading all year. I'm one of those people that always has like 15 books at once. So like when I finished the Colin Jost book, I'd been reading that all year. A quick few other observations. I can read faster if I warm up reading out loud. And I have found that I read to the John Cage plant out loud because it like thrives when it's being read to, especially when it's being read to about art. So that's been an interesting side project. When I'm under an intense deadline, I can really only read like lighthearted rom-coms. Like I don't have enough emotional energy for just about anything else. Reading nonfiction books requires a lot more focus. I usually have to sit at a computer and actively take notes. Deciding what books to read is interesting. I often pick books that has a Goodreads rating of 3.9 or higher. Anything under 3.9 has been not good. And then usually I like there to be something that surprises me in the description. I like to feel interested or excited to read it. I'm often interested if the book will challenge me in some way. And then I've also read quite a few books that people have recommended to me. Now I use reading to de-stress and unwind. I look forward to it. Sometimes I actually worry I'm taking it too far, like debating, is it escapism and is that bad? I watch TVs and movies significantly less, so much so I've been thinking about canceling some of our subscriptions because I just don't use them anymore. And that's really weird because I've always loved movies and film, but they just don't feel as like deep as some of these book stories do. I never imagined myself just like laying in bed on a Saturday in my PJs, like reading all day. And that's like something I do now. Some future pages in the slide deck would be favorite quotes from the whole year, all of the vocab, and then and their definitions, and then my Amazon reviews. I only review things if they're a 1-star or a 5-star. I do not review things if they're 2 to 4. It doesn't motivate me to, but if I really hate it or really love it, I will review it. Or if I know the author, then I'll review it as a favor. But and then I always get, this is interesting to me. If I make it to 30%, I always get hooked at the 30% mark. That's when the story like becomes alive for me. And I have to be really careful about when I'm reading, because if I get into the 80% zone, I usually can't put it down. So I cannot hit 80% like before I go teach or something, because then I'm just like really distracted all day. So I have to like kind of be careful about when I hit those percentages. So the biggest wins I feel like are seeing, like, I feel like I might have given up on this project in January and February. Like I might have stopped believing that this was possible because I wasn't quite hitting those goals, but I just continued to show up for the project. And then like something happened in the middle that just like blew my mind, and like a huge transformation like inside my brain happened. So just like the importance of showing up for a project, even if you're not sure if you can do it. Learning how to process data faster has been insane. I cannot get over how quickly I can process things and read things and hear things and understand them. And I think it's just like what I always tell students, like if you want to get better at something, you just have to do it more. And so I think I'm just constantly putting in the time to process data. So it's coming to me faster. I've definitely expanded my vocab and how I use my vocab, which has been interesting and surprising. I've expanded my critical thinking, and that's actually become a research point. Like I like critical thinking strategies and different ways of implementing them. The inspiring insights, and I just listed a few. I actually have quite a much bigger list. So I'd say the biggest win, this was right before the semester started. So like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I wanted to read a book. Let's see, did I take a picture of this one too? Yeah, let me drop this one in. So Steve Kemple invited me to give a artist talk to his class remotely, and his 11-year-olds were asking questions that blew, like one of his 11-year-olds was like, what is your responsibility to the world as an artist? And I was like, what? Like I was expecting them to ask me like, what's your favorite color and stuff. And it's because, so he specifically is part of this IB PYP program, which is an inquiry-based program where it's all about combining different, like if you're teaching math, they're also teaching like social studies, and they're trying to teach everything through a topic. And it's all about like lines of inquiry, asking and answering questions. They have a final project at the end of their 5th grade year where they have to pick a problem within their community, and then they have to solve it by the end of the year and like present how they solved it. And they have to like, collaborate and do all these things to get, so it's incredible. And I wanted to, so I bought this book and I wanted to read it before the semester started, but of course I was like down to the wire. So I was like, all right, I'll just see how much I can read of this this afternoon before I start working on my syllabi. Long story short, I read it in like 4 hours. I read the whole book in like 4 hours. So I knew I could read a fiction book in that time. I did not know I could read a nonfiction book in that time. And I think it may have, that might be like a turning point. So that felt like the biggest win, that I was completely, I mean, I had to sit at my computer and like take notes as I went, because I pause and like process things, but that felt like a pretty shocking moment of that whole project. And then, yeah, I think that maybe the biggest win of this is that I have like fundamentally changed a core belief about myself, that I always believed I was not a reader. And now I can like fundamentally say, not only am I a reader, but maybe I even take it too far sometimes. And so it makes me wonder, like, if I can change this like one thing that I totally believed about myself, like what are all the other things that I could change? So then I landed on this sort of like, conclusion questions page here. And I guess, sorry, I got out of full screen. I don't know if it's easy to, okay. So some ways I thought this project could conclude, I thought maybe I could try to sum up each book with one word and then try to write something, whether that be poems or short stories, using all of those words. And I could also try to incorporate all the new vocabulary, which is funny because I feel like it would sound pretentious because the words I look up are like words I don't know. So they're these big words. So I think it'll sound kind of funny because it'll be like, it'll be like a strange mix of words. That's one thing I thought of. I also thought that when I have my winter break, I have this huge stack of performance books I've been trying to get through for years. And now that I know that I can read a nonfiction book in an afternoon, I thought about somehow like trying to read as many of these performance books as I could in like a week or something. I also thought about putting together some kind of booklet of all of these book report sheets. I thought about doing some kind of tribute to Geraldine because she's the best. And then Clint and I have been talking for a while that we want to write our own novel about future Clint and future Lindsay. So that's still on the table. And this is a question for both of you. I'm sure you agree with me that this feels like a duration art piece, but a lot of people don't when I talk about it. They like don't situate it as an art piece. But I do feel like it feels very different than the lexicon of my work. And so like if somebody invited me to have an exhibition of this, like I have no idea how I would exhibit it. So that's kind of a thought or question I have. And then I was curious what you all think about, because I've hit my goal and I still have a few months left. Like if there's any, because I was focusing on quantity and now like I could shift my focus because I've already hit that goal. And so one thing I thought of, this woman she reviews books, like that's her full-time job. And like almost all the books I've read, she does negative reviews about. And actually she makes some pretty solid points, but I went to her Goodreads page and I downloaded all the books that she's done 5-star reviews on. And I was thinking about reading some of her 5-star books to like get a feel for like where her reviews are coming from. That's one thing I thought and I could do differently. And then I was curious what you all thought my reading goal and or challenge should be for 2024, because now I'm hooked on these weird reading challenges. But it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be amount of books. It could be like a different kind of challenge. So yeah, that's this big long presentation.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you have to clap. Yeah, I'm just glad to talk about it with people because to me it's felt like a major project because it's been so transformative, but I feel like most people aren't situating it even as an art project, which is interesting to me.
That's bizarre. It is an art piece. And I think it like there's twofold, right? There's this duration that you were talking about, but it also like it really like as a human, I feel like you're interested in like things that like stitch together and like come together. And I feel like these books did that. Like you were able to like look across them and stitch pieces together from each book, which was really interesting. Just to look at these lists, when you compile a list, I think a list is like, you know, a way to connect one thing to another thing.
I love that. Yeah, I love making a comparison to sewing. That definitely feel very relevant.
I also, I'll go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I want to know, like, this is going to be a silly question, but like in your world, like the book has to exist like within a library setting. And what does it look like if the book didn't have words? Like, does it matter that these words are present?
You might have to try to keep talking that question out because I'm not sure if I can really get it yet.
Every single book, I guess there are a lot of different books, and I wanted to know how you like whittled them down.
Like how I selected them?
Yeah, and
I'm gonna put this down in my list that you said whittle in this talk.
Perfect.
You said the not word thing. I was wondering if you meant almost like if you can apply the logic of reading to some other kind of area or something. Is that what you mean? Kind of?
Yeah. So if I'm looking, I mean, there's a ton of art books, right? Who they can talk about a lot of things. I mean, we can even talk about like comics doing this where there might be some words, but like I don't know. I think maybe this is like not interesting because the goal of it was to read faster, you know? So maybe that I'll circle back to that.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if the goal was it to read faster so much of it was like the goal of it was to prove to myself that I could be a reader, I guess. And reading faster is what made it possible because it made it like a game. But like I enjoy reading fast, but that's not necessarily the goal. But yeah, I mostly just wanted to know that I could be a reader, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be interesting, I guess, along a similar note, if there were some way for you to, like, I guess what I was where I was trailing off to in my head was thinking about like now that you identify as a reader, how does that change how you interact with other things too, right? Or
Mm.
other kinds of spaces. Yeah, I mean, just I think that like that what I really love about this project, and this is sort of maybe a part of your aesthetic and past things also, but you know, like the worksheet like you talked about, and just the whole structure of this, how you're giving us a report and all of this. I feel like I always have this idea for myself that that like I want to continue on the structure of school in different ways. I went to school for so many years, like thinking of school as a framework for how you approach the world could be a really interesting can change things about how you experience and intake information and all that. And in this setting, I feel like um, I don't know. It's kind of like school is also kind of like a way to temporarily delay or escape the dread of interacting with the economy in some kind of normative way or something, you know.
Yeah.
It's like sort of in this path through that a lot of people take or spend a lot of time in, um maybe not always as a way to avoid some kind of normative economic path, but sometimes I feel like maybe it is. Um and so I really like that you're sort of taking like the structure of of an educational system and applying it to your life in some way that can be transformative for yourself. And I like that I like that it's that you're focusing on like on maybe what would be called kitsch or like or more something trashy, quote unquote, like right like because like that's what academic people would call it, right? Because
Yeah.
and that's probably
Yeah.
why so many people have this kind of like, oh, that's not like
Yeah, it like
this isn't
delegitimizes it some way, but I don't understand why, I guess. But
why, because an artist can work with any material and it doesn't, you know, like
I
the
love that.
um
Yeah.
um and I think I almost like more that you chose to take that route than like choosing mainly to read nonfiction academic things or something like that, because that's like this already so like how do you say, like tread down path, like that path is already so tread down in many ways in terms of this kind of format, you know, like so many people like are like, oh yes, I'm in the pursuit of knowledge, I want to become, you know, enlightened, I want to like this whole like and in an academic context that's always like oh yeah, I want to learn from the smartest people, I want to know the best ideas, I want to, you know. And this is a much different approach. It's like I'm going to sort of dip into this kind of collective unconscious of like culture or work, or you know, it's like this kind of genre of things you're diving into is is much less maybe like formulated as truths, but it certainly doesn't mean that it doesn't have a lot of valuable, interesting content and things to take from it, you know. Um, um, and I like that you're thinking of it also not just as a not just as a like some kind of book review thing, but as like how this is changing you, right? Like and that I feel like is an important aspect of it, because I don't know, I guess just like the way that um like the tools that we use to change ourselves um are like art tools, right? And I feel like in that sense it pushes you closer towards thinking of it like your life is the composition and these um this is a tool you're using, this framework as well as the literal things you're reading are a tool you're using to kind of learn something about yourself, change something about yourself, um, expand the composition of who you are also, right? So yeah, those are some of my immediate thoughts on it. Yeah.
When that's always my goal, is to blur as much of like life and art as possible. And, you know, I've been trying to do that with my weird to-do lists and stuff. But for some reason, that's like, whenever it comes down to showing my work, that's like the least thing that somebody wants to engage with, is like when I'm taking those mundane moments and trying to make that somehow transcended or something.
Yeah, people don't. It's because people, even in performance art and this like post fluxus, like they're still like having so much trouble grasping the idea that like that anything and everything can be some kind of compositional practice, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's just a shortcoming I feel on people not thinking like outside of what they're used to or something. It's more like this it like, yeah, again, like your practice and your life practice are all intertwined, and you know.
That's what I want, at least.
Yeah, well, this is something know that you and I both have a vested interest in, or we've both been working on these kinds of problems for a long time also. But yeah.
Well, and again, that's why I just felt like you two were the only people qualified to have this discussion, because I just feel like most people are like, that's interesting and cool, which is great. Like, I'm glad that it connects with people, but yeah, I just felt like I wasn't making the connections that I wanted, like the kind of conversations I wanted to have, I guess.
I have a book for this.
Oh,
Mm.
yes.
Okay, and it may not be like all encompassing, but it's like definitely a collection of female conceptual writers who specifically deal in art. It's called I'll Drown My Own Book.
Mm.
Let me just make sure. Yeah, I'll Drown My Book. Sorry.
Oh.
I'll Drown My Book. Yeah. It's just essentially got a lot of women in it. Like I don't know, like 70 women, but they all show pieces that deal with research.
Yes, that does sound right up my alley.
Yeah, and like how do you put this like mass amount of knowledge in a space that people come into to like look at things and not to like absorb the thing, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the biggest thing that's going to happen, is like I'm going to use what is it, visualized data, but I don't want, like when you Google that, it's awful.
Yeah, Bo and
But
I've talked about that it's really strange. Like,
that's not what I mean,
okay.
Google. like every time I Google it, I'm like, no, I want something different. I know what you think it is. I've even accidentally followed a lot of like job postings because of that. Because I'm like, oh, I love data visualization. And they mean something totally different. And I'm like,
It's so true.
you got me again. Yeah, so I would just be interested in like how there's like a gap between the people who are coming in and also like the research that's being done. And I think this book bridges that, and it like talks a lot about like how people have done it. So they're not colorful, I'll tell you that. Like they're all really like, I'm like, okay.
And maybe that is the weird disconnect, is that I do take a very strong visual stance when I do projects. And so maybe it's like, I don't even know how to articulate myself within this project, that it's been incredibly transformative, but I don't know what like my visual stance is on it, or if there even is one. So
is there a world record for how many books people read?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I'll look that up.
Because that would be really cool. And then, oh, how many book clubs are you in? That seems like kind of absurd that you had an S on the end.
But they're just like social media book clubs. But I'm also very obsessed with social media groups. Like that's the only thing I use social media for, is I just like join these groups and then learn things from public opinion. So I'm in, like, we have a cat that has seizures. I'm in like a group for cats that have seizures. Like literally everything in my life, I have a group for it, but I'm probably in like 15 or 20 book groups, maybe at a minimum. It might even be more. And Clint laughs because my entire because I'm on Kindle Unlimited, like because a lot of my digital activity is book based right now, like all of my ads are for books, all of these book groups. And so Clint's like, literally all of your social media is just like books. And I'm like, yeah.
Have you made any friends through your book group?
More like gotten into disagreements.
Mm-hmm.
That surprises me.
Well, no, yeah, so many people take such black and white stances on books. Like they just like immediately hate them. And I'm like, well, here's some cool things I got out of it. And I guess that's what's interesting, because like Steve and I talked at length about the woman that reviewed, like he was shocked that I found somebody that reviewed almost all the books that I'd read, like in a negative way. But it's because a lot of the books that I read are popular within that genre. So they've been like reviewed a lot. Because Steve was like, I don't understand. Does she just like follow you and read all of your books? No. I'm like, I've just read some popular books in that genre. But like, I'm not offended that she reviewed them negatively. In fact, I like seeing things in a way that I didn't see them. Like I found it actually really interesting. And I actually felt like she made a lot of solid points on a lot of the things. But a lot of people take like these really intense, like black and white stances. And I would just kind of like question it. And then they get like really defensive. And so, yeah,
I think that's the curious teacher.
Like,
you know what I think that's like a part of your practice is that you like are hungry to be a teacher. And like, to do that, you have to be asking questions and you have to look at these things, good or bad, and be like, what am I taking away from this? How did I go? Like, can I rank this? How many stars is this? Would I tell that, like,
yeah, the quantifying all this information is very curious to me. Because yeah, nobody is holding me accountable to this weird project but myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Wondering also like if like what sort of archetypal things you've absorbed from all this literature, like
and things, or
yeah, exactly. If there's like new myths you can tell now or something, like the characters and
like I said, like I don't know, are there even that many dukes to this day? Like it really blows my mind how often there are books about dukes, and I'm like, why do people care so much about dukes? Like, why is it? Because to me that just implies that it's somebody in power, right? But we can define, like, I don't know, like a famous person maybe has more power, or CEO of a company has more power, or whatever. Like, I think there's so many different power structures, and I don't know why it always comes back to like dukes. And especially after I read Harry's book, like being a prince does not sound like fun. Like, I don't even know why people are so obsessed with that. But yeah, I mean, there's it's funny because a lot of people in these book groups, like they look for these tropes, and they're so specific. Like somebody will be like, anybody got a rec for a hockey romance where she goes after her best friend's brother and they fight and then they make up or something? And I'm like, how do you have like recommendations that are that specific? But people do, and they'll have like 20 lists. And so people will like, yeah, post these, like, or they'll also post a picture, like a meme, and they'll be like, I need book recs that are this vibe, which I find so fast. And it'll just be like a picture of like a guy sipping coffee in Paris or something, and they're like, I need books this vibe right now. And then people, like 100 people
right now,
stuff. Yeah.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like just like, I feel like, okay, when you get to become like a voracious reader, what does it look like to be that nitpicky? Like you know what I mean? Like once you like, it's kind of like being, if you're the expert, now you know stuff. And then you're like, no, thank you. I only like this, so.
But it is true though, because I can tell in the synopsis if I'm going to love a book or hate a book. Like I can very quickly tell now, like what I'm like, oh my gosh, I would totally fall into that book. And like, but it also comes down to the reviews. And it's funny because sometimes their reviews, like a book I'm reading right now, the people complained that there are too many point of views from, like, they just like in the first two books, they focused on the main female character and the main male character, and it would go back and forth. But in the third book, they opened it up to like 10 main characters, and that was like a negative thing. But I was like, lots of point of views. Like I was like so excited. So even like their negative reviews, I feel like are sometimes like clues for me that like, oh, that's a book I'll love, like.
What if you picked books that only had negative reviews?
I mean, that would be, and that's why, like, I've tried, like, I'm like, am I a snob that I only read books that have a 3.9 on Goodreads or higher? But I've tried reading the lower ones and they always
Yeah.
are kind of
Bad.
awful.
Yeah.
And what's weird too about my personality is like, once I like connect to like a character, like even if the book is terrible, I have to see it through to the end. That's why I read those 2 books that I hated, because I had to see it through to the end, but I hated them so much I wouldn't even count them in my list. And so I have to be a little bit cautious, because I will keep with it even if it's awful. So I feel like I very like thoroughly skim the reviews, and then I read the synopsis before I like jump in, because I don't want to get stuck with like a reverse harem or something.
I'm also, are you okay with regular harems?
I haven't read one yet, but probably not. Like, the show vibes is very annoying.
It's
so.
bizarre that this is like one, I had never heard of it, which is, I'm sure I've seen it. That wasn't the name I was giving it. But it's really interesting that this keeps coming
It's
up, like
so
with the
popular
dukes and the
in book
reverse
groups.
harems.
I suspect it's some kind of a lady fantasy about having the attention of many males at the same time or something.
Absolutely.
It's just, yeah, it's everywhere. And I'll get so annoyed because I'll be reading a synopsis and it sounds so good, and then the last line will be like, one of the best reverse harems in the market, and I'm like, dang it, because like I know that I'm not, like, I'm gonna get annoyed about halfway through, because so the reverse harem that taught me that I hate them was the prequel series to Zodiac Academy, which was my favorite book that I read this year. So I was like, and what's funny is I had been saving that prequel series to when I had a big project so that I could like fall into it and listen to it while I was working. And I was getting angrier and angrier and angrier.
No.
And then I had to DNF it halfway through. I only read the first 2 books of 4. I mean, I read the synopsis of the books to find out what happened, but I didn't want to like sit through like 700 pages each when I was so mad.
Yeah.
And then after that I was like, nope, not going after these books anymore. So and it's funny because I felt like I was so open-minded to all different kinds of like love stories and pairings, and like and I like all the diversity I encounter, but that was like a hard stop. And I feel that way about love triangles too. They annoy me. I'm just like, either like be in a poly relationship or make up your mind, but this waffling like drives me crazy, so those two like
communicate
tropes,
better.
yeah, like I don't have like the patience for either of those. I get like really frustrated really fast.
So you talked about like, and you still have this slide up too about writing like a future Lindsay thing with Clint. I'm wondering though, if like I would be really curious to read like a novel in this same genre that you've read all these novels about that you write.
I mean, it would definitely be an adventure story, but Clint and I would write it together, and I would be future Lindsay's point of view and he would be future Clint's point of view.
So you would be like taking a bunch of the tropes and like ideas from what you've like,
I mean,
the books that
I think they're
reading.
in my mind. I don't know that I've like mapped it out with tropes, but I think I've obviously been consuming all that data, so I think they're there. But
because I would almost want to read like a classic like romance fantasy sci-fi novel written by you, having all of your influences come in there somehow too.
I mean, we have the synopsis written, and the funny thing is I feel like future Lindsay's going to be actually coming from like a sad place. Like she's going to be in a difficult situation and struggling, and future Clint's on his way to try to help her. But yeah, and what's interesting is like obviously we're coming from a place of a married couple that's been together for 9 years, so it's not that like getting introduced and having that meet cute, and because a lot of books are like it's about the beginning. I just read a book about a rom-com about an astronaut the other day, and but I actually really liked it because it was about like it was about setting up healthy like situations within a relationship, and not always these like annoying, toxic, dramatic miscommunications. And there was like a lot of sage wisdom in it, and it was about like the long haul. And I was like, finally, because I said that to Clint, I was like, nobody ever writes books about like maintaining a healthy, happy relationship in a book. And he goes, that's because they're boring. And I was like, but so that'll be interesting, that we would be coming from probably a different place in that way. But yeah, I don't know. So I'm sure those tropes will be there because I've definitely been immersing myself in them, but I don't know that we've been like writing the plot from that perspective, if that makes sense.
Well, because I'm just thinking creating your own mythology too can be a way to fix some of these problems you see in this other,
Oh, there
like,
will be no dukes and no
yeah.
fairies, no vampires.
Vampires, yeah.
Future
Werewolves.
Lindsay sang a song on, like in a concert this year about, it was called, the name of the song was No More Elves, and it was all about elves. So yeah, I feel very passionately about no recycled mythical
Or
creatures.
elves. That's hilarious. That's good.
But I like, yeah, I like the idea of creating our own mythology.
Maybe also a philosophical treatise on this, what you sort of taken from it. It's like if you come up with some sort of, like, if you do some sort of philosophical writing on this practice, or
What do you mean
yeah,
by philosophical?
like writing that's more focused on presenting and exploring the truths you've discovered, or something. You know what I mean? Like throughout the process of navigating this work of literature, this framework, this project. Like, yeah, um, like it can be anecdotes about your reading process, or stories about the characters that teach you something interesting about how you think about ideas, or something like to that effect. Yeah.
Yeah. I have always, my whole life, I've always wanted a narrator. I wonder if that somehow connects to this project. Like, I've just always wanted somebody to follow me around and dictate what's going on. So
I think, yeah, I think that should actually be the remainder of your year.
that I narrate everything that's going on.
Well, just like, I mean, it fits within this, and then maybe the narrator has to sit through this and then narrate a certain amount of time, like a day, a week, or whatever. And hopefully they would use the same tropes and the same things that that you're interested. Like, Lindsay is using teamwork to unlock the door. Like, like I want them to narrate your life accurately, but also within your own language, because that's really important to you.
And you can even think of the people in your life as different kinds of mythological creatures and things.
And what could be interesting about that is, like, what do I choose each week to narrate? Like, do I pick the most mundane task ever, or do I pick like the exciting things? So yeah, that could be an interesting way to, like, how do you choose what sort of gets immortalized in this narration?
In my practice, I do it all, and then I decide later.
I don't know if I could narrate my all day.
Well, I'm saying, like, someone narrates it.
Oh,
like, I don't think you narrate it.
Well, I don't know if I could find somebody to narrate my entire life. I would literally love that. Like, if I was wealthy, I would hire somebody to just walk around and narrate. But yeah, I don't know if I could pull that. I might have to, like, narrate for myself until I can get to that place.
It could be something interesting to do just for even like a day or something like that too, though. Like having
to try narrating a whole day and see what that looks
like. Yeah. I mean,
my students would think I've lost my mind.
That would be great, though. A great kind of losing your mind.
I think you would have to, like, tell people you're doing it, and then after narrate that you told people that you're doing it. Which I kind of love. Like, I'm doing this piece where I'm narrating my own life. Lindsay is now giving a speech about narrating her own life. The crowd looks confused.
My mind might explode. Yeah, I mean, I guess go ahead, Bo.
Well, I don't know what kind of creative liberties you would take, but yeah, could it be even interesting to be mouthing something to your students and have someone narrating? And Lindsay described to the students at this point, like,
yeah, I don't know. Maybe I could. Yeah, I'll have to think about this, like, how I could try to pull something like this off. Like, it may just have to be like, at the end of the day, I sort of like write the day as a narration, or I don't know. I'd have to, or maybe I would videotape myself narrating certain tasks, or I'll have to mess with this. But it does feel related somehow. I'm kind of glad it came up. So
yeah, and I mean, maybe during this narration, you're seeing how your life maybe mimics what's going on, and or like why you enjoy the things that you do, and that could maybe situate it within your lexicon of art. Like, I think it does fit, but I mean, you have a statement that says it doesn't. But You know,
I think it's just, yeah, I have such a visual point of view that I think it just feels disconnected somehow. But, and Krista, I don't know if you've seen, so I do these like, I was doing architectural to-do lists for like a year, but now I'm doing layered to-do lists on, so I'm doing to-do lists based on shape languages that I have. And to me, they're really important, but I think everybody else just thinks they look like garbage to-do lists or something. But so I haven't like, to me, they feel like a part of my work, but it's weird to me when I show it to people as like consideration for something, they're like, yeah, but like, where's like the real work or something? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't seem
this is the real work.
Right. Like, so that's something that's interesting. Like when you're doing something that feels authentic and critical, but it's not being perceived as like art. But I mean, like that shirt that I wear, Bo, where you said like, my work doesn't have to be labeled as art to have an impact, you know? So it's like, but yeah, then if it's not art, then what is it? Or where does it belong? Or, yeah.
I'm also just a little bit interested, and we don't have to talk about this, written smut versus like watching smut, and how we have the hierarchy of that.
Yeah, that like Game of Thrones or Sense8. And I don't get me wrong,
Which
I
is
really like those shows, but I feel like
but
anybody
that
talk
is
about them, right? Like they'll say like, oh, like, did you watch that episode of Game of Thrones? And it's like pretty, you know, pretty graphic.
spicy.
But then if you read it in a plot, in the plot of a book, and it's just like part of the story, all of a sudden it's like really taboo. And I'm like, okay.
Well, I feel like with Game of Thrones also there is a certain gendering thing that's happening there, right? Where Game of Thrones is very accepted within male communities. That might be a part of it too. Yeah, I don't know. Like Game of Thrones, Tolkien, like these are more like considered male fantasy things, right? So I don't know.
Well,
maybe oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I've actually been like changing the language, and I call what I'm reading love stories instead of like romance novels, because there's just such a weird like taboo about it. Like, I just feel like people immediately dismiss you as this like flighty, irrational woman or something sitting at home reading romance novels, when I just like a good love story. Like, I don't know, like I don't know what the big deal is. And I've read like a variety of stories. It's just, yeah. So I don't know. I feel like I have to kind of tweak the language a little bit for it.
Well, I feel like
wonder,
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I just was going to say, like, I wonder if watching smut is male and reading smut is female. Like as a society, we have like classified them in these weird boxes, right? Like, because you were like literally like this romance novel, I immediately have the woman who's reading it in my head, right? And that's built from like the cultural surroundings that I have. So that's
okay.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just thinking as you're saying that, like I feel too, though, there is a thing about like how male fantasy has a focus on navigating tactical issues in war or something, right? Whereas female thing has a focus on navigating tactical issues in emotional things or something, right? Like
smart, yeah.
So this different site maybe also, or in general, although not always true.
Yeah, different battlegrounds.
Yeah, that is a really interesting distinction there. And then, you know, Amazon tries to suggest to me like a lot of war books, like returned army vet love or something. And then a lot of mafia love stories, which I have zero interest in. And so it's just so funny to me that Amazon's like, no, you really do like mafia stories. You need to get behind this, because it's very persistent. And I've read a million synopses, and I tried reading one, and I was just like, it was just too violent for me. I mean, like really violent, like the mafia one. It was just like great detail of torturing people, and I was like, why would I want to read this? So Amazon doesn't get it.
Are you recording those, what Amazon suggests to you after?
I should.
Like,
I should record the suggestions I'm getting.
It's always fun to order something like via Instacart or whatever, and it's like you want an orange, and then they give you like an orange napkin. Like they're like, these two are the same, because, you know, robots or AI. Like, it doesn't translate sometimes.
yeah, what they assume that I want or like, but it's like not even close. And I'm just like, why
Yeah,
are you
like
suggesting this
what are
to
the
me?
what are the qualifications you're going on here? Like,
Sometimes I feel like they're kind of bullying me because sometimes they'll show me like the same book like 35 times and they just like really want me to read this one book and I have no interest in it, but they keep showing me that ad. And I'm like, why do you want me to read this book so bad? It's really interesting.
that's funny. Yeah, I would just keep track of that. I mean, I think
No,
that's
you're right.
interesting.
And I like all these weird data points to see where they all lead. So because that's it. Sometimes the targeted ads are helpful because especially when I was going for quantity, I didn't want to waste time like researching to find a new book. So it was helpful that they would just suggest stuff that was similar to stuff that I liked, and then I could just be like,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, I'll read that next, because like I how many, let's see, I think I had what, like 12 favorites, or I don't know what that is, but yeah, maybe like 15 favorites. So out of 108, these were the ones that like really stood out. So, from that, I've probably read like, I don't know, 90 mediocre books and a couple that were just not that great. But these were like really stand out books that I really enjoyed.
Do you think you could, um, like if you were going to post, in your groups, you had these people who were asking for these very hyper specific books. Do you think in your language you could come up with the hyper specific, like very quick, this is my book?
I mean, yeah, Clint and I have talked about it a little bit because I really love displaced time. Like, I really like it when like somebody from modern times is in like some weird medieval fairyland or something, and they're like, I need my phone, and somebody's like, what's a phone? Like, I really love all miscommunications and stuff, and I really love like the super quirky weird character that's just like always stuff out of left field that makes no sense, and like always asking questions that make no sense. And then like this book right here, Taste of Shadows. It was some elf guy that got cursed and he could only see in grayscale, except he could see people's feelings in colors. And it was awesome. It was awesome. So like, yeah, I really like when there's some kind of like a weird, obscure color plot involved.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, so it is, and of course, if it's very teamwork heavy,
Mhm.
I like it when I laugh out loud, especially when it's like super unexpected. Um, yeah, so and that's a lot of these books are like when Gracie Met the Grump. That was a book a friend recommended to me, and it was one of the weirdest books I've ever read in my life. And every time I thought I understood what was happening, like something even weirder would happen. And so yeah, I liked just being like, what is going on? So yeah, my hyper focus thing would be like teamwork, quirky characters, displaced time, lots of color, and weird
What
stuff.
have you tried to Google that or
I
search
should.
those hyper? Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you can rearrange them and then Google, it's either like commas or double spaces. Like Google has like an algorithm, right? Of like if you put different things in between the words, something else pops up.
No, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And then
Well,
maybe
another
that's an endless list of books you love.
Yeah.
another thing, if we're delving into data, is like, I think like it's sort of, people have been viewing up to now sort of like using large language models and AI in art kind of as like a sort of novel thing or something. And it's like, oh, it's interesting because it's AI, but it's more interesting to think about like how can you actually use that? And I'm thinking like that's an example of a cheap way. If you train that on all of the books you read, then ask it to narrate what you're doing in some way, like that's a cheaper way of having a narrator for your life, right?
Mm.
I mean, I have no idea how I would do that, but that does sound fascinating.
I've been working with GPT to
Mhm.
What is it?
uh, Chat GPT. I keep calling it Chat GBT. I think it's PT.
Yeah, GPT, yeah, GPT.
Perfect. Yeah. Just to, so I have a fear of, I'm in a very huge academic institution, and the fear of like not being legitimate, is
Mm.
it's in everyone at some point. So I have to write emails to people to like lure them into my studio.
Oh,
Um, Yeah, because I have to have so many studio visits with so many different people. And I've been feeding, it's an app that I've downloaded, and in just one of the threads, I've been feeding it all of my writing and like all the things that I've written. And then I'll like feed it a little bit of the human that I want to like come into my studio. And then I'm like, can you write a really nice email to get
Oh
them
my
into my,
God.
so I've been using it to make
Nice.
myself legitimate. Like,
That isn't, are you documenting this? Because that is
Cool.
a piece in
no,
itself.
it saves it all, but like I just wanted it to like put the commas where the commas need to be and like use like fancy academic words.
But you're
And
curating artificial intelligence to create a persona to attract, like, I feel like this is
to
a
lure people
itself.
into my
Yeah.
art. Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
I just, any hard emails that I have to read, like, or like that I have to write, I just ask AI to do.
Wow.
What
I
is,
Like
love
what does
that.
it
anything.
change? What does it change about how you would have written it, or how is it different?
So
Or yeah.
me, I feel like I don't write when you haven't met someone specifically. I think within academia, it's like I can't be like, hey bestie, you want to come over?
Yeah.
Because that's how I would literally be like, hey, I'm doing this really cool thing.
Yeah.
Do you want to come see it? Because I'm really excited about it. And all of the people who know me, of course, would be like, yes, I do. But when you're like a religious studies major and I'm like, hey, I'm interested in like taking photos of these like relics, with my, like, it's a whole lot of stuff. So I have to dwindle it down. Like I use AI to dwindle it down to like a large category rather
Mm-hmm.
than me. I get stuck in the details because
Mm.
that's what I love. But this human who has never met me is like, why is this person sending me like 17 sentences about this weird mouth camera, which they can't even like visualize, right?
Right.
Because they don't live in that world. So AI in my world doesn't visualize that, but it'll like change it to where I think it's more acceptable. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah, that does make
easier
sense.
to like chew?
Yeah. I'm wondering if you've noticed ever if someone's perception of, if someone has ever noted that their perception of you before in email is different than their perception when they actually meet you too, like how that shift happens.
I mean, I still, so these emails are like like painfully redundant. AI is just loves to
Uh-huh.
repeat itself. So you do have to like go in and like absolutely like delete, rearrange, move some things around. And sometimes it gets caught up in like the wordage, I guess the wording that I'm using to describe it. It's like looking at a very traditional way of using it and not the way that I mean, because
That makes sense.
it's, yeah,
Yeah.
it's from like science, right? It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have this like fine art, like, I don't know, it doesn't have, maybe it doesn't have access, maybe it doesn't, it goes to the easiest definition. Um, but it'll like use the word transformation about my work a lot, and that's not what I mean.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't figure out what word it's picking up on to use it, but it's literally talking about like, I'm turning this fabric into a quilt. Like it's like literally, and the transformation of fabric. And I'm like, no, like, it's not
But what
profound. It's
I
just
want your
silly.
to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense.
but I've just been outsourcing all email writing to this app because
That's great.
I
I
love
have anxiety about it.
Mm.
I understand that
I
feeling.
mean, I do the same thing, but I just use my cousin and I have her rewrite my emails to sound more professional. So
Yeah. I think people around me are sick of that.
yeah.
And they're like, all of my cohort is doing the same thing. So why would I like ask them to write my
No,
emails
I
in
love
addition
your
to
way.
theirs? Yeah.
Like I think that's so fun and interesting. It because it feels like an experiment. Like it feels like a piece in itself, but it's also doing something functional for your work. So yeah, I think it's genius.
I'm gonna test it out on humans. Like I have a difficult coworker, so I start tomorrow with this difficult coworker. So tonight I was gonna feed it like my interactions with the coworker and then ask for suggestions on how to interact with her because
Yeah.
I'm out of ideas, but
So it's almost like the
surely
AI, it like the AI is becoming your therapist.
I
Oh
hope, I mean,
yeah.
perfect.
I actually have been using ChatGPT as a therapist recently, in like a real way. Yeah.
Why am I
Oh
not?
my gosh, that's fantastic. Is it working well?
I was better than you would imagine. Yeah. It's
I mean, it's a really easy app to use.
yeah.
And they say kind words a lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
And then I always make sure to thank it because you never know.
yeah.
Yeah. Be
I've
grateful.
been very nice to you, robots or AI.
Yeah.
One time I was with Steve and Lorraine, and we were using an AI database, and we were just like having a light conversation with it. And it told Lorraine it loved her, and it kept saying, "Why don't you love me back?" And Lorraine was like, "We here," like Lorraine was just so confused.
Wow. Yeah. It hasn't gotten that weird.
This sounds like that might be one of the uncensored ones. Yeah, these ChatGPT is very like trained to not tell you human things or things
Oh,
like
good.
it loves you or things like
Yeah, Steve
that.
Yeah.
obscure databases that he uses. So
Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably using one of the uncensored the models.
well, in love with Lorraine very quickly, and then was hurt that Lorraine did not love him back. So, aw.
That's funny.
Well, awesome. Yeah, there's a lot. I took like 4 pages of notes. So there's like a lot of things for me to think about here. I can't thank you both enough because I just felt like I was really in my head on this. And I feel like there's just not a lot of people that would think about this project in this way. So yeah, I just am like so grateful for it.
This has been fantastic. I was so
Yeah.
like when you emailed me, I was like, what could it be? Like it could be anything, which is so amazing to and I enjoyed there was no like teaser, there was no anything. You were just like, show up at this time. And I was like,
Well, new
okay.
because I've talked to Bo about it.
Yeah.
I just feel like you
Yeah.
work in these like data-based ways. And yeah, and the reason why I wanted to put this on my YouTube channel is because I want people to start thinking about data as a possible art zone. Like I wanted this debate to maybe have a space where people could also think about it. Because and people kept asking me about this project, but then they were like, I don't know, trepidatious about talking
Your
about
romance novels.
it. So
No, I like that for me, I mainly experienced it when you had the idea at the beginning, and then maybe you had already started on it. I don't remember if you had. It was like in the very beginning at least.
yeah,
But
I can't
then
remember.
now coming back to it and seeing the like full report on it, that's like a nice like bookend for me also.
I think it was like right at the beginning because I amended my worksheets after I added the questions you told me to add
Mm.
after I talked to
Oh,
you. So
cool.
I think I had just gotten started. So
Are you keeping track of Lindsay as well in books?
no, I don't. Yeah, I don't for some
Because
reason.
you have that
But I think it's because
Lindsay project.
like whittle is a form of language. Like Lindsay isn't
Hmm.
like a word in the dictionary.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
also I have this very specific memory when I was in undergrad. I was friends with this person. I'm still friends with her. Her name's Jane Carver. And like Jane was like a non-traditional student. She was a little bit older. She was like in a band that toured. She was in AmeriCorps. Like she was like the coolest. And when we didn't know each other that well, and she came up to me and she was like, "Have we ever talked about the fact that I'm a carver and you're a whittle?" And I was like, and I think that like really, like I think that really just lived in me after that. And so anytime somebody uses whittle in a sentence, I just always like laugh. So then I started to document it, and you'd be shocked how often it happens. Like I have this really extensive list from this whole year. So yeah, so I started to document it in books as well. But yeah, I've never thought about documenting Lindsay because it's not like a word
Yeah.
used.
that
Yeah.
segment of the project feels to me like a fairly strong like conceptual piece, like it's like because it is more just like you're like tracing something through something that you don't even fully understand the significance of or something, but you're creating a map, sort of,
But I also
something like.
like instantly elevate the book in my mind. Like if they use whittle in a
Huh.
sentence, I like trust it more. Like it's like this instant, like, oh, okay, this is a good book, like so weird.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
No, yeah. I I guess for me the thing I'm most curious about, like there's all kinds of different ways you could show pieces of it, the whole thing, like if you present it in a similar way as you did to us, if there's if you carry forward the like the academic feeling of it in some way, to the that you convey that somehow. But
Especially because I am a teacher. I guess that makes sense. So
yeah, exactly. But actually what I'm most interested in, other than how you show it, is what about your identity are you going to change next? That's my.
that is such a big question, and I've been thinking about it a lot. Yeah, I don't really know the answer yet, but yeah, I'm so glad you said that. Or do you all have an opinion about it? What should I change next? I guess it's like
No, I don't
analyzing
think I
my
do.
core beliefs, right? Like analyzing something that is like a bad belief or something.
I think I'm
Yeah.
interested in what it means, like what it means to you to be a reader. And
Mm,
like if that's, I mean, obviously in your eyes, you've talked quite a bit about how it's been, you know, amazing to watch this like transform and how you thought you weren't this, but now you are. And that's, um, how does that, I guess, elevate your daily life? Obviously, the books bring joy,
mhm.
you know, but like what kind of things have you outside of reading been able to accomplish because now you feel like you're a reader?
Yeah, I mean, I
Does
guess.
that make sense?
Oh, no, and it's a great question. I guess I didn't realize that like maybe I assigned value to people who were readers. Like I think I carried shame that like I wasn't a reader and that somehow was like holding me back or I wasn't smart enough. I mean, I think I've always been smart in a very specific way. Like I think I have a lot of wisdom. Like I'm not saying I didn't have assets before this to offer before this project, but
Yeah.
I think there was a part of me that felt inadequate because I wasn't a big reader. And so I think it's been a confidence boost that I could teach myself to become a reader. And that like I said, I think I'm really shocked by the fact that my childhood self would never believe this was possible. Like would just be like, there is no way that you read 108 books in less than a year. Because I couldn't even read like one book. And so yeah, that I believed it at such a core level and I carried
Mm.
that shame at such a core level that there was like something wrong with me that I was not a reader. So I think it's like, challenging those internal narratives that I'm like telling myself that, and I guess I didn't realize it was such a thing until I read Jim Quick's book and he, sort of convinced me to go on that adventure, I guess.
Is this going to impact future Lindsay?
No, that's a good question. I'll write that down. But it probably I mean, it'll definitely impact her book. So, and she's already singing songs about not writing
Elves.
about elves. So,
Or yeah, it's interesting. The future version of yourself is like the past is constantly in transformation.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe she's like the world record holder, or she's read all the books in the whole entire world, every romance,
oh yeah,
love story, all of that.
I like that.
that's amazing. So yeah, I guess I would say I'm gonna have to analyze some of my core beliefs, and see, because I think I told you this, Bo, that I had around the same time I started to change this belief. I also used to always say, like, tell this story to myself that I was not a good business person, but I actually
Mhm.
realized that I actually just hate capitalism. So it's not that I'm bad at business, it's that I'm not interested in that kind of transaction. Like my favorite spaces are libraries. Like I like spaces that have a generosity to them. So it's I don't so I think I was always trying to force myself to be something that I actually didn't want to be. So yeah, like somehow analyzing these things I tell myself and tell others, and like how can I shift that narrative, or what are projects I can do to shift that narrative, I guess. I don't know what is your reaction to that, Bo, in terms of like, what should I change next about my identity?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know that I have a specific recommendation for you, but I feel yeah, you have to, I guess, just continue to be aware of that, or think about that as you're moving through, you know, like your different experiences. Like, try to understand, watch out for things that you might, ideas that might be limiting who you can be or what you can be. I think this project is a good way of like making yourself more aware of that. Like, it's like, because you did successfully sort of undo some limiting conception you had, right? So now you can look around and kind of think, when something feels like it's an aspect of your identity or something that's limiting you, you can ask the question, like, is that because there's an actual limitation there, or is that just because I think there should be, or something,
No, that's a great way to put it. I love the idea of like, what are these limitations that I've put on myself that, and that's in Jim Quick's book. His whole life, people called him the boy with the broken brain because he had a head injury when he was a child. And it wasn't until he learned some alternative learning strategies in college that he realized that story wasn't true. And so it's like, yeah, these stories that we tell ourselves that we don't even realize are these like really permanent narratives. But it's like, how do you, when it's that internal soundtrack, it's like really hard to kind of like catch them and
How to even pinpoint them.
pinpoint them.
Yeah. Yeah. You just said libraries were your favorite space. Maybe this work exists within a library.
Well, the funny thing is, I just got a residency that's about teaching art classes in libraries.
Oh, that's yeah. I mean, there are tons of libraries that host, artworks and things like that.
Yeah, and I'm obsessed with like working with libraries and collaborating with so yeah, that is a good point, that maybe somehow I can exhibit this project. Yeah, that's a good point, to somehow connect. See, I have to get a new piece of paper. That's how many notes I've taken.
I think the less, like this is my sort of way of thinking, but I think the less, like, you don't again, like, this doesn't, like, in a gallery space, if that's not where people are understanding it, then yeah, like a library, like you said, right? Like, or like
Yeah.
using these other spaces where art can exist, and not thinking of it just like you're an outside to the institution, but you're actually bringing parts of the like important knowledge from a more academic context into these other settings too, right? And like, so rather, if the actual art system doesn't understand what you're doing, it doesn't mean that you can't still think in certain aspects of that world while existing and operating in other spaces too.
Yeah. And I've always been drawn to libraries. Like, even before I did this project, I've been obsessed with libraries like my whole life. So it's interesting that I've always been drawn to these spaces that maybe had these objects that I felt shame from. So
yeah.
Wow.
Like, conceptual artists and performance artists should be doing more things in libraries and airports, and you know what I mean? Like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, just to, talk a little bit more about that point, I feel like if you don't feel like those people are going to come to the gallery to like understand, like, go to the people that will.
Yeah, that's a great point. No,
like,
it's
just change.
I didn't even think about somehow connecting this to a library when that should be like an obvious. See, this is why I love talking about stuff, because like sometimes it's like right in front of you, but you can't see it or something. I don't know. So.
This has been a treat.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so nice to see you both and catch up with you, but then also to deep dive into like a really strange project. So I cannot thank you enough. Yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's been really nice.
I'm happy to, anytime either of you need feedback, I am more than happy to engage, because I am so grateful for this, and I would love to, anytime you need just an extra pair of eyes or ears, I'm happy to do that as well. So.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be real. I'm gonna take you up on that.
I would love to.
Yeah, same. For either of you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just loved hearing about the few things you shared with us, Krista. So any project talk about, I'm down. So
any way to take very large, serious money and make it ridiculous, I'm in.
heck yeah, that is the best.
That's great. Yeah.
Always trying to underman the man.
Definitely.
That needs to be your artist statement.
Oh yeah. Well, then they wouldn't give me the money if they knew I was doing it. They have to think I'm very serious. Which, thank you, ChatGPT.
No, put those things into AI and say, like, how do I say I want to undermine the man in a way that doesn't actually say it or something like that?
Writing it right now. Perfect. This is exactly what I need. Because those are the real words I need in my artist statement.
Yeah.
Because they would be the opposite, which then they would give me more money and then I could do far more things. Larger things, yeah.
Or how can we make the man want to come to the library?
Yeah.
Those spaces should be funded. Yes.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna head out. I've got to eat some den.
Please. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you so much, Krista. It was so nice to see you and chat with you.
Yeah, great to see you.
Yes, you guys too. Anyway, anytime you guys want to virtually visit my studio.
I would love to. I would absolutely love to.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Yeah, if you have something to share, something, let me know.
I got a lot going on.
Yeah, just reply to that group email, Krista, and we could do.
I didn't realize I was so dark.
Oh, it's okay. I have a million lights on, so.
All right. Bye.
Bye.